Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at defenses, specifically their points per game throughout the season, combined with their strength of schedule throughout the first 11 weeks. Then take a look at weeks 15 through 17 strength of schedule for each of these defenses in order to assess, based on performance, who we should be looking to acquire, potentially just hold, or even cut altogether based on their playoff strength of schedule. Watch to the end of this video, and you should have a pretty good idea what defenses you should be looking to acquire, hold, or sell. And so now we're going to take a look at the fantasy defenses sorted by their weeks 1 through 11 points per game, along with their corresponding weeks 1 through 11 strength of schedule. And so at the top, in kind of their own tier, you have the Seahawks and Texans. Noticeably, the Seahawks have done so with a plus 7.6% strength of schedule, and the Texans have done so with a negative 2.3%. The Seahawks have definitely had a slightly advantageous strength of schedule. Meanwhile, the Texans have had a slightly disadvantageous strength of schedule, but nothing insane for either one of them. Then in the next tier, we have the Rams, Steelers, Broncos, and Browns, however you kind of want to, wherever the cutoff point you want to put is for those defenses. You know, notably, the Rams have had a negative 8.9% strength of schedule, yet are third in points per game, and they have been particularly stingy and not allowing a lot of points per game. I believe the last couple of weeks, they've been allowing about 13 points per game. It's pretty impressive and a good streak for them. The Steelers, however, have done so with a plus 15.3% strength of schedule. Then kind of moving into the next tier, in my opinion, you have your Colts, Jags, Patriots, Eagles, Buccaneers, and Lions. Teams like the Colts and the Patriots have had by far and away the easiest strength of schedule, which I definitely think has kind of helped them get up here. Meanwhile, the Eagles have had by far and away the worst and most difficult strength of schedule for any of these defenses so far. Moving downwards, you have the teams like the Bears, Falcons, Vikings, Chiefs, and Titans, where teams like the Bears and the Falcons have had a pretty easy strength of schedule. Meanwhile, some of these other teams have had a slightly disadvantageous strength of schedule. Moving on further down, you have the Cardinals, Bills, Saints, Chargers, Panthers, Dolphins, and Packers kind of in a tier. The Bills, Chargers, and a couple of these other teams, including the Packers, have had a pretty easy strength of schedule. So a little bit disconcerting if you expected some of these teams to have good defenses coming into the season, that they haven't been performing with such an advantageous strength of schedule. But then further moving down, we have teams that have just not been great contributors for us, in terms of their fantasy points on defense. Teams like the Cowboys, Ravens, Raiders, Commanders, Jets, and 49ers. And then kind of in that bottom tier, you have the Giants and Bengals, who are averaging an abysmal 2.5 and 2.3 points per game. But with the Giants, to be fair, they've also had the second most difficult strength of schedule of any team so far throughout weeks 1 through 11. Moving on to the strength of schedule for weeks 15 through 17, along with their points per game, I do have it sorted by strength of schedule throughout the duration of the fantasy playoffs. The Saints have a plus 63.5% strength of schedule. That is utterly ridiculous. The Texans also, who were already a top-performing team, have the second easiest strength of schedule significantly with a plus 53.6%. Then you have your Giants that are in kind of a third tier, in my opinion, who went from having, I believe, the second most difficult strength of schedule to having the third easiest strength of schedule throughout the duration of the fantasy playoffs. Then you kind of have your Buccaneers by themselves and your Dallas Cowboys, and kind of like a mini tier with the Bengals all the way through, give or take, the Chiefs. The Bills definitely have an easy strength of schedule along with the Jets. Then kind of the Bears and Eagles are sitting there at about 10% each positive, so that's definitely good for their strength of schedule. Then you move down to the Cardinals all the way through, I'd say give or take the Patriots, where it's, a slightly advantageous or slightly disadvantageous strength of schedule, but nothing ridiculous. Then you kind of have your Ravens all the way through the Titans in a tier where it's starting to get a little bit more difficult. Then you have the Jags all the way through the Seahawks, where it's really starting to ramp up and become more difficult in terms of specifically the strength of schedule for those teams. And then at the bottom, you have your Commanders all the way through your Chargers, where it's looking extremely brutal. And you may want to consider that for sure if you are worried about the points that you could get from your defense throughout the duration of the fantasy playoffs. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mage Jack, Infamy MTG, AOYOB, and The Dawn. Without your support, this would not be possible. As you're probably well aware, if you've been watching my videos for a while, I cannot get monetized because of the film breakdowns I do, and even just the little videos I have where I have clips of plays in them. They get demonetized every single time, making it therefore impossible to collect any revenue. So obviously your support is greatly appreciated. And if you are so inclined to become a member, the perks would be you will get access to a private Discord where we have both a real life and fantasy football chat, as well as a voice chat if you just don't want to have to type a bunch of stuff. I'll also give you detailed roster breakdowns and roster reviews where we talk about the strengths and weaknesses of your team. Then we kind of break it down further by looking into the scoring settings themselves and the starting lineup requirements to help you build the best team to help you dominate for years to come. In both Dynasty and then in Redraft, obviously, I'd help you with a good, solid game plan, especially if you know where you're drafting from. Then also give you detailed trade advice based on your specific league settings to help you dominate. Also give you access to private live streams and the ability to not only see videos at least one day early, but also the ability to suggest videos that you would like to be created. So if you would like to support the channel, I would really appreciate it. If not, just please like and subscribe. Let's get back to the video. And finally, we have a look here at the defenses, which are once again sorted by the weeks 1 through 11 points per game, but also have their weeks 1 through 11 strength of schedule, their playoff strength of schedule, and then a verdict as far as what I would personally be doing with some of these defenses in a redraft format once again. Now, you may disagree. And one other thing I want to explain is when I say a serious buy, I'm not suggesting that you trade Puka Nacua or JSN for a defense, right? It's within the context of a defense for a defense, and more probably within a tier of a defense to another tier of a defense, right? And so kind of in that top tier, we had the Seahawks and Texans this year. Well, the Seahawks had a plus 7.6%. That's going down to 16.5. Meanwhile, the Texans had a negative 2.3%, and that goes up to plus 53.6, which once again is the second easiest strength of schedule. If you could flip the Seahawks into the Texans defense, I would absolutely do that. But as far as the Seahawks are concerned, I think they're such an elite defense that I would just can probably hold them all together if possible. Then kind of in that next tier, we have the Rams, Steelers, Broncos, and Browns. I think that the Steelers are a serious buy because while they have had an advantageous strength of schedule at plus 15.3%, it only gets easier going up to 27.4%. The Rams, for instance, I think could be a potential sell high or just hold. Once again, if you could swap them for a defense within the general tier of defenses here that has an advantageous strength of schedule. Teams like the Colts and the Patriots going from a plus 27.2% for the Colts and a 32.7% for the Patriots, going down to a negative 15.3% for the Colts and a negative 4.4% for the Texans, or for the Patriots rather. If you could trade those defenses for a defense within the same tier that has a more advantageous strength of schedule, I would do that for sure. The Philadelphia Eagles are a very good buy in my opinion as well, because they've gone from having the worst strength of schedule in the entire NFL at negative 21.2% to having a slightly advantageous strength of schedule at plus 10%. And given how well they've performed with such a terrible schedule for scoring purposes, there's a chance that they really do perform well down the stretch here. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are another example of a defense that you should be looking to get, going from negative 10% up to 38.4%. I think they're a serious buy. The Bears, they're a team that's going from 13.4% to 10.5%. I do want to say that they've had most of their secondary out, specifically their cornerbacks, throughout the duration of this season. And they've been playing backups, but they've still been taking the ball away at a very high amount. And I think with the return of some of those players from injury coming up, I think Stevenson, if I'm remembering correctly, has returned to practice. And I think Jalen Johnson could be back any week now. I do think that they still have an advantageous strength of schedule. And I think they could be a good hold for the fantasy playoffs if you can't get one of these elite tier options. I think the Chiefs, going from a minus 7.4% up to a plus 28.5% are a serious buy. Teams like the Bills, while they have had an advantageous strength of schedule, they haven't been performing. And even if it gets slightly better, I still think they're a potential cut candidate. But moving down to the single individual team that I think you might be able to pick up off the waiver wire if no clever owner has already done so would be the New Orleans Saints, because they've been a middle of the pack team for sure, but they've been doing that with a disadvantageous, even if it's just slightly strength of schedule. but they have the single easiest strength of schedule significantly in the fantasy playoffs at plus 63.5%. I think they are the easiest buy slash pickup for you in terms of defenses specifically. I think the Chargers, who are already a middling team, going from plus 12.5% to minus 36.5% are cuts. And I think a lot of these other teams moving down here are cuts. I think the Dallas Cowboys going from plus 12.4% up to 36.5% could be a potential buy, especially with the defense being solidified in the middle with Quinnen Williams. But I still wouldn't consider them a top tier option. But moving on to the very bottom, we have the Giants and the Bengals. And so these teams, if you look at it, the Giants are going from having the second most difficult strength of schedule, and by a wide margin, mind you, compared to anyone that had a better strength of schedule than they did, up to 44.5%. That is a wild difference. I know the defensive line is very, very good. They should be able to get after the quarterback, but it is still a risky option for you, even though the strength of schedule is ludicrously easy. So I do want to warn you that just because a bad defense has an easy strength of schedule doesn't necessarily mean that you want to play them over a team that's actually already very good, right? So very risky. And then the Bengals, same thing. They have such a bad defense. They've done so with a slightly advantageous strength of schedule. They do have a plus 31.6%, but I still think they're very, very risky. And so with the Giants and Bengals, I would once again just caution you that just because they do have an easy strength of schedule doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be top performers for us. But, I still think that they would be better options than another poor defense that doesn't have a better strength of schedule, to be fair. And so, yeah, where do you agree? Where do you disagree? Let me know below in the comment section. If you happen to be a fan of a particular team and you have some extra insight into some of these defenses, feel free to let me know below in the comment section. But yeah, if you would be so kind, I would really appreciate it if you would support my Patreon. I'm doing this full time now, and your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you to my patrons. If you cannot or do not wish to, if you could just like the video, subscribe to the channel, maybe leave a comment below, I would really appreciate it. I hope you guys smash in the fantasy playoffs, win your championships, achieve all the glory, and I hope you have a good day.